So I have the pleasure of welcoming now Dr. Atul Sinha, who has just been awarded a PhD by the SVYASA Institute in Bangalore on his study of Indic systems. Uh, Dr. Sinha holds a bachelor's in economics from SRCC, that is the Shriram College of Commerce, Delhi University, and an MBA from the prestigious XLRI Institute at Jamshedpur. Post his MBA, he spent 32 years in a corporate career, ending up as vice president of marketing at Britannia. In the next phase of his career, he set up a brand design company called Scarlet Tiger Brand Design. The company has worked on marquee brands like Santoor, Chandrika, Bingo, Candyman, Kingfisher, Cadbury's, Park Avenue, Spaces Bed Linen, Vidal, and many more. An interest in spirituality and the Indian knowledge led him to enroll for the just was awarded. His areas of research is the effect on yoga on school children. He has studied Patanjali Yoga Sutras and Gurukul system of education and the systems of Indian philosophy in detail. He has published 3 academic papers and a 4th is under review. He has also published several articles on Indic issues. So with this, I welcome Dr. Sinha to sort of enlighten us on today's topic.
Thank you, Mani. So this is a continuing session. In the first session, a very long session, I introduced all the 12 systems of Indian philosophy, including Jainism, Buddhism, and the 6 Vedic systems, the 4 Buddhist systems, Jain, Charvak, and the 6 Vedic systems. And then in the last session, I talked about Gaudapada. I started off with the introduction to Vedanta, Gaudapada, and Badarayana. This is a short session in which I will introduce Shankara and Advaita. So without much delay, let us get on to sharing my screen and share. And what is all this? Isko band kar sakte hain. And here. Right. So this is the second part. And as I go along, I will review bits of the first talk. Some of you may have heard the first talk. Some of you may not have. Whatever it is, we will go ahead now. If you understand this slide, you will know everything about Vedanta. So Vedanta gives an example, and the example is that you're walking on a road on a dark night, and there's a rope lying over there, and in the darkness, the rope appears to you like a snake. So the philosophical question is the snake real or it is not real? And there are many answers to this, and each answer is supported with great logic. So if you don't know, you will be convinced that that logic is perfect, right? But broadly, there are these 4 views of Vedanta. So one is what is called Ekatvam or monism. The propounder of this school is Gaudapada, who was Shankara, who I'll introduce, Shankara's grand guru. Shankara's guru was Govindpada, and Govindpada's guru was Gaudapada. He's a very, very well-known philosopher in the Indian pantheon of philosophers. So what he says, that only the rope is real, the snake does not exist. If you were to translate that into the question, this is an example, but the real inquiry is into what is the reality of this entire existence, the entire world, whatever you see, what is the reality? So the rope and snake is an example. So if you were to extend this to the reality of the world, what Gautapada is saying, only the underlying consciousness, the underlying intelligence which pervades everything in the world, only that is real. The world does not exist, is what he says. Only Brahman, you must have heard the term Brahman, only Brahman exists, the world does not exist, is the Gaudapada's interpretation of the, what is the reality of existence. Then came along Shankara some many years later, and a few hundred years later, and he came up with the theory of Advaita, or non-dual. Advaita means non-dual. What he said is that you cannot say that the snake does not exist. It exists, but it is not real. So he introduced this idea that what exists may not be real. So he introduced a very interesting idea. For the first time in philosophy, he introduced the idea that something which exists may not be real. So what he says, the rope is real and the snake is an appearance. You cannot say it doesn't exist because the snake appears in your consciousness. But that snake is not real, it's an appearance. So again, if you translate it to the world, he says the underlying consciousness, the underlying intelligence is the sole reality. What this whole world which you see is an appearance, not an illusion, an appearance. All right. Then a third interpretation, and the person behind this is Ramanuja. He was a saint in Tamil Nadu sometime in the 11th century, who came up with the theory of Vishisht Advaita. He says that reality is one organic whole. The rope is real, and the snake is an attribute of the rope. It's a quality, it's a guna of the rope. So he says that this, if you were to translate again to the world, he says the entire world is one organic whole, where the underlying consciousness or intelligence is the main reality, and everything which you see, individual souls and the world, are attributes of that underlying reality. So world is one organic whole with Brahman as the reality and everything else as attributes of that Brahman. All right. And the fourth view is by a person called Madhva. Madhva came again a few hundred years after Ramanuja, and his base was in Udupi in Karnataka. The famous Krishna Mutt in Karnataka, which still exists, in Udupi, which still exists, was founded by him. And he came up with a theory of Dvaita. Basically, what he said, the rope and the snake are both real. And his funda was that the snake appears in your consciousness, and when it appears in what appears in your consciousness is real. He says, but the rope is an independent reality and the snake is a dependent reality. Meaning that without the independent reality, the dependent reality cannot exist. Okay. So if you again translate this to the entire existence of the universe, the world, the independent reality, Swatantra. Swatantra is what he called it. Swatantra is the only Swatantra is Brahman, the underlying consciousness, intelligence. right? And the world is a paratantra or a dependent reality, but it is real, and these two are separate. That's why the separate, that's why it's called Dvaita or dualism. So here you have the four uh, different interpretations of the same observation, of the same question. And the question is, what is the reality of existence? And these are the four interpretations. In the last uh, talk, what I had said is that, uh, this scientific, what we call today scientific epistemology, where you study a physical object, that epistemology does not work in philosophy, and therefore there is a role for intuitive epistemology. Yogic perception is a valid epistemology, and that is why the Vedas, which is a compilation of yogic insights, is a valid epistemology. That means it's a valid source of knowledge. So based on that, here are the four main interpretations of Vedanta. If you understand this slide very simply, you understand the nub of Vedanta. So one theory is only Brahman is real, the world does not exist. The other theory is Brahman is real and the world is an appearance. It's Maya. You must have heard the term Maya. So Maya denotes appearance, not illusion. Illusion is something else. So there's a difference between appearance and illusion. Illusion is a trick to your senses. You see a mirage in a desert, your senses are tricked. While appearance is not a trick. Everybody, all of us are seeing an appearance. So there's a difference between appearance and illusion. So the second theory is Brahman is real and the world is an appearance. The third theory is that the whole world is one organic whole with Brahman as the reality and everything else as an attribute of that reality. And the fourth theory is that no, there are distinct realities. Human souls are one reality, the world of matter is another reality, and Brahman is a third reality. So if you understand this, you have understood the four major streams of Vedanta. And in this series, I've already covered Ekatvam in the last series. If you haven't heard it, please access my video and hear it. In the next few episodes, I will cover Shankara's Advaita. And then later on, I will go into Vishishta Advaita and Dvaita as well. So let's look at Shankara. Shankara was an amazing person. Some say that he was around in the 7th century CE, that is around 600 something, middle of 600 AD. Others say no, he was 7th century BC. That means he was like 650 BC or so. And these let the historians and the chronologists sort it out. We are not interested. We are, as philosophers, we're interested in what he said and not when he graced the planet. But I just have to tell you that there is a kind of a controversy, dispute. Some say CE, some say BC. Okay. And he was born in Kaladi, in present day Kerala, where his ashram still exists. Okay. And as I said, he was a Shishya of Govindapada, who in turn was a Shishya of the very famous Gaudapada. Gaudapada is very famous because he wrote a very distinguished commentary on a very major Upanishad called the Mandukya Upanishad. And Shankara was a child prodigy. By the age of, I believe, 6 years, he was completely conversant with all the Vedas and the Brahma Sutra at the age of 6. He was an absolute child prodigy. And it is said that he lived for only 32 years, but he from Kerala he went to the Himalayas, Kedarnath and all twice in his lifetime, and in those days walking. So twice he has made the trip to the Himalayas. It is said that as a child he was roaming the Himalayas, and a sadhu asked him, "Who are you?" And I believe the sadhu just expected an answer, "What a child like you doing over here?" And where are you from? Who are your parents? That kind of question, very empirical questions. But what Shankara said is immortalized in a song called Atma Satkam or Nirvana Shatkam. We will listen to it. It's a 6-minute YouTube video. We'll listen to it in this talk. And where he said, he gave a very philosophical answer, and is that Nirvana Shatkam is his entire Advaita philosophy. He said, "I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm not my eyes, I'm not my smell, I'm not my speech. Shivananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. I am the image of Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva." So it's a very famous song, Nirvana Shatkam. We will listen to it. You like it so much sometimes, you should download it and listen to it every morning. It will uplift you. He was outstanding debater, and in his lifetime, he set up the 4 famous mutt: the Sringeri Mutt, the Puri Mutt, Dwarka, and Badrinath. And as I said, he died at the age of 32 in Kedarnath. He died in Kedarnath. Very recently, his statue was inaugurated at Kedarnath. Okay. So, what is the time in which Shankara lived? So, after Buddha, the Bauddha Darshana, the Buddhist religion and Darshana way of life, became very, very dominant in India. It is said that maybe about half of Indians became Buddhists, and the reason for that is that there was a kind of there was a kind of a decay in Indian religious thought, and it kind of became very empty rituals. That if you went to a religious teacher and said, "What should I do?" he'd say, "Do this homa, do this yagna," and the meaning and the importance of those homas and yagnas was lost, and it became very empty rituals. So Buddha came and gave a very simple thing, to more spiritual path to follow, and became very popular. But for many reasons, Buddhism also declined. And that so Shankara came in when Buddhism had declined, and Karma Kanda, rituals, had also was on a decline. And when both Karma Kanda and Buddhism were on decline, the Bhakti cults of Vaishnava, Shaiva cult, Shakta cults were getting popular. So the logical philosophical aspect had kind of declined, and the religious theism was on the rise. And this is when he came in with his philosophy. And his work is one of very great daring, because you will see in this series that he goes completely against religious aspirations. The religious aspiration requires a God who's a friend, who can listen to your woes and your cribs, and to whom you can go and surrender all your petty problems in life, and the God will give you succor. And so, but he went above all that, and he came up with just pure philosophy. And and his philosophy generated a very fierce reaction from the bhakti people, and the two fiercest reactions were from Ramanuja and Madhva, and we'll cover that as the series goes on. So basically, let's look at the views of reality. So one view of reality is the question, again, the philosophical question is, what I'm seeing in front of me, this table, this computer, what I'm seeing in front of me, is it real, or there is some other underlying reality to that? So there's one theory which is known as subjectivism, and that holds that the whole world is unreal. It is the world, your mind is projecting the world. Only your mind is real, that what you see in the world doesn't have a separate existence. And there is a Buddhist school called Yogacara which holds this view. Realism, on the other hand, the other extreme is realism, which says that the mind and world, the mind and matter are separate. So there are two different realities. Each is real. So the Jainas hold that view. There's a philosophy called Nyaya and Vaisheshika. They hold that view. Samkhya philosophy of Kapila Muni holds that view. And as I said earlier, Madhva also holds that view. Gautapada came up with a variation. He said that, yes, I subscribe to subjectivism, which means that the world is a projection, but even the mind is unreal. The only reality is pure consciousness. We saw that, monism says only the underlying consciousness, intelligence is real, everything else is unreal. Mind is also unreal, world is also unreal. So there is a very strong logic to what Gautapada said, but it is very revolutionary, and it goes against normal experience. It doesn't explain the normal experience we have of duality. That means this table, this chair, this computer is not me. I'm not projecting it. I can touch it, I can feel it. So that this doesn't explain it. But it is, if you're very bold, philosophically bold, you may be able to see his point. Shankara holds the fourth view, which says the world has a practical reality, its appearance. It does not have a permanent reality. And he derives this from his analysis of four states of consciousness, which I had covered the last time. I will tell you how he differs from Gaudapada in this regard. So the four states of consciousness in the Mandukya Upanishad, on which Gaudapada has given a fantastic commentary. It's one of the best books on philosophy ever written in human history. And so Gaudapada says that there are four states of, not Gaudapada, sorry, the Mandukya Upanishad says that there are four states of consciousness. One is the waking state. That is, right now, you and I are awake, and we are having a common experience. So I'm talking, you are listening, we're having a common experience. I'm talking a subject and you're listening to the same subject. So we are having a common experience in the waking state. All right. So in the waking state, your senses come into play. That means your speech, your hearing, your touch, smell, all the five senses are very active, and they are, so right now you are listening to me, so your hearing is working, you're looking at the screen, so your eyes are working. So, and those senses are taking in information to the mind, and the mind is processing that information. So that's the waking state. Now, in the night, when you go to sleep, you dream. So in the dream state, what happens is that your senses fold up. Your senses are no longer working. But one part of the mind is looking at what is stored from the waking experience in another part of the mind. And since your senses have folded up, that experience is surreal. It's different. It's different. It's a dream experience. All right. And the third state is the deep sleep state. So when you sleep, and this is scientifically proven, people put electrodes on your brain, and they measure the waves. And there's a time when you are in deep sleep. That means there's no dream also, right? And why it is a state of consciousness is because but in a deep sleep, first your senses and your mind have also folded up. But why is it a state of consciousness? Is because when you wake up, you have a memory that I slept well. You wake up, I slept so well. So the question is, where did that memory come from? And the answer, the analysis is that your consciousness was still awake, and that memory has come directly from consciousness. And the fourth state is a transcendental state, which is a meditative state, which is when we transcend the mind and body and we get absorbed in that consciousness. So the basic theory of the four stages are that your underlying consciousness, the underlying intelligence, is just a witness. It remains constant across the waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and in the transcendental state, there's nothing else but that pure consciousness only. All right. Gautapada gives the dream and the waking state equal status of either, whichever way you look at it, reality or unreality. So, and he gives, where people ask him, how can that be? In the waking state, all of us are experiencing the same thing. All of us looking at the Zoom screen. So he said, yeah, but in the dream state also, there are other people in the dream, no? I mean, you're not dreaming just alone. There are other people in the dream who are participating in the dream. So what's the difference? So he says, another question is, like, how can it be in the waking state, I feel thirsty, I drink water and my thirst is gone. So he says, in the dream state also, you have dream thirst and there's dream water, and the dream water quenches the dream thirst. So what's the difference between dream and wake? So, and this way he gives 10, there are 10 different objections. He handles them to basically show that dream state and waking state are equal status of unreality, right? And he uses this analysis to formulate his position that neither the mind is real nor the outside world is real. Only reality is that underlying consciousness, which is a witness across the four states. All right. So coming to Gautapada on reality. So he agrees, as I said, he agrees with the Buddhist Yogacara school that the material world is subjective. And what happens is the consciousness moves to produce an appearance of unreal objects. So it is just consciousness itself, the underlying consciousness itself, with some movement going on over there, and this appearance of objects appear, and therefore the world exists in our mind. And the Yogacara says that there is no permanent, like we saw it's getting a little complicated, but just bear with me. Yogacara says there is no permanent witness consciousness, there's only imperial. That means each individual has his or her own consciousness. Gautapada disagrees with that. He says that permanent consciousness is just consciousness, and from which all of us draw. So it's the same. My individual consciousness is no different from the universal consciousness. Now, Shankara disagrees with Gautapada. He says that there is a difference between dream and waking state. He says that the dream state conflicts with the waking state, but the waking state does not conflict with dream or deep sleep state, which means that what Shankara is saying, that when you wake up, you know that the dream was unreal. So there's a conflict between waking state and dream state. But waking state is, there's no conflict with dream or deep sleep state. Second, he says the waking experience is triggered by objects. And therefore, this whole theory of subjectivism flies against empirical experience. Now, this is a constant theme in philosophy, both Western and Indian philosophy. One says कि ये सब unreal है. Other says, how can it be? I'm experiencing it. So if you say this is unreal, you are going against a commonsensical experience. So Shankara has taken the middle ground, where he says, no, there is a empirical experience which is giving you the waking experience, and that empirical experience cannot be said does not exist. Okay, so therefore objects exist on their own right, and and when you are getting knowledge of the objects, there's a distinction between the object and me or you who comes to know that object. So when you see a rose, the color of the rose, smell the rose exists in its own right, and you exist in your own right, and you're getting the knowledge of the rose. While Gaudapada says it's your consciousness which has created that rose. Okay. So Shankara says that's not true. The consciousness itself has no content. It is just a featureless transparency. It's just a mirror in which things reflect. Okay. And all variety and movement is on the object side, not on the consciousness side. So he disagrees with the Buddhists. He disagrees with Gaudapada. And he says the world is as real as the consciousness of man, of a human being who sees and feels it. So he says that both subjectivism, as you saw, which says that the world does not exist, your consciousness is projecting it, and realism, which says the world is real and consciousness is real, both do fail to explain the experience. And the objects are therefore not the phantoms, and they are the content of a divine consciousness of Ishwar. So Ishwar ke consciousness mein sab objects hain, right? And the world, that is matter, and self, that is souls, are aware of the world which is present in the divine consciousness. So that means Ishwar is unke consciousness mein the world hai, and we become aware of that world. And when we are awakened through meditation, we realize that the world is only Atman, just like salt in seawater. You cannot see the salt, but it is, it is there. Okay. So his theory is called radical realism. So he says that there is a separate reality to the outside world, but that reality is an appearance. Why is it an appearance? Because it is a content of Ishwar consciousness, collective consciousness. As far as you are concerned, it is separate. Only when you self-realize will you realize that then your consciousness matches with Ishwar consciousness, and then you realize that everything is only consciousness, just like salt in seawater. But in our individual existence, the objects which appear are different from, they are not projections of the mind, they are different. So I'll just, I want to leave you with this today. But, Gaudapada, who took a very radical view, he said, there is no creation, there is no dissolution, there's no one in bondage, no one aspiring for wisdom, there's no seeker of liberation, and there's no one liberated. This is absolute truth. So this is it. And I told you about the Nirvana Shatkam. Let me try and play that video for you. Just a minute. How do I stop share? How do I stop this? 1 second. Ah, finally. Just
चित्ता विना न च श्रोत्रजी न च घ्राणने न च चिदानन्दरूपा शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् चिदानन्दरूपा शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न च प्राणसंज्ञो न त्वयि पञ्चवायुः न वासा दधातुः न वा पञ्चकोशः न वाक्पाणिपादम् न चोपस्तपा चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न मे द्वेषरागो न मे लोभमोहः मदोर्नैः सर्व्यभाव न धर्मो न चार्थो
na kamo na moksha anandarupa shivoham shivoham
Chidananda